Hi, Dr. Llewellyn. Could you please introduce yourself for us?
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Dr. Guy Llewellyn, an assistant professor at EHL Campus Singapore, and a former executive chef who teaches courses such as food and beverage cost control, data analytics, and revenue management. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
So the last time that restaurants operated at revenues higher than expenses was in 2012. Could you tell us a little bit about the F&B scene in Singapore and what has changed since then?
The only thing that has really changed since 2012 are the number of restaurants. That has grown by over 40% since 2012 to the last time the reports were released in 2022. And so while that has continued to grow, the amount of revenue has pretty much stayed flat. So while the restaurants are growing, the number of people aren't growing, which means that everybody's fighting over the same amount of money. So it's becoming an industry that won't be able to survive long term, or the vast majority of restaurants will not be able to survive long term unless something changes. And so that either has to be people are spending more money out, which in this economy is kind of tight to do, or expenses have to be reduced, which again, is very hard to do in this economy. So we're really at a hard part in this industry where people want to go into it, but there's not a lot of revenue, and so there's a high level of competition. There's been an increase in food costs, there's been an increase in rent, and there's been an increase in labor costs due to the new policies being put in for minimum wages, which is great for the workers. Now, what the problem is when you have these sorts of increased costs, and you have a revenue that's only increased by 1%, then that's not a good market for the long term.
Even with over 2,000 restaurants closing this year, we're still seeing more open up, more than 2,500. What are the market forces behind such a huge boom amidst massive closures?
There's a lot of people that like to eat out, and because of that think that they can open a restaurant. Or you have the people that are sitting at home having dinner parties and their friends are saying, hey, you should do this professionally, it's really good. So there's a lot of people that think that they can be the one to stand out in an overly saturated market. And unfortunately, without having a lot of industry experience, it is incredibly challenging. And then you have the restaurant empires or restaurant groups that do a fantastic job, and they know what they're doing. And so those see a great opportunity for a great location, and those are the ones that end up being more profitable or survive for longer because they actually have a background of knowledge of the industry and of Singapore's market.
So do you think these new establishments can survive in the long term?
Depends. It really depends on the establishments. If you're looking at a restaurant group that's opening up a new location, absolutely they can be successful, but they just have to be wary about where that revenue is coming from. If they are relying purely on just selling the food and beverage as a way to survive, it's becoming more and more challenging in this day and age.
So I noticed that my local kopi stall now sells their own coffee beans packaged for home use. So why should F&B establishments diversify their revenue streams, and do you have any strategies that they can adopt?
Really, they have to start diversifying where their revenue is coming from. And this is what we really learned from post-pandemic, is we can't just rely on the sales of food and beverage to survive. It's great if you can do that, but a lot of the times when things go bad, when there's dining restrictions, then that's not good enough to cover all of the expenses. Now, ways that people can do that, if you already are an established business, then a lot of people try to sell cookbooks. I always say the easiest way to do it is if you have high quality ingredients, take those high quality ingredients that you put into the kitchen and also allow people to buy them. So if you run a nice little bakery, why not sell pre-packaged muffin, just add water, put it into the oven, and have your own? Doesn't mean that they're gonna stop coming to you, because they're gonna come back and buy the muffin mix, buy the coffee beans, as well as while they're there, take a coffee away. So you're getting revenue twice from the same person. I worked in Hong Kong for many years. There's a restaurant chain, Feather and Bone, that do a fantastic job where they bring the grocery store into the establishment. Everything they serve on the menu, from the steaks to the chicken to the sausages to all the pastas and dry goods, you can buy there to take home, or you can then order it to eat in-house.
So could you tell us about the other benefits besides revenue increase when you have a diversified revenue stream?
So the other benefits you can see is partnerships. Okay, so there's a lot of places that are now partnering with other commercial enterprises that we haven't seen before. So you can have your local kopi shop that partner with a bank. And so that way you can have that relationship between the bank and the coffee shop, which helps bring in new customers that might not have heard about you before or might not have tried you before. So you can really start to attract new customers while you're partnering with different organizations. So there's stats saying that for every 10% increase in footfall, there's a 6% increase in revenue. So we can get the people in the doors, they spend more money, which is really important if you're a smaller restaurant that's just opening up, that you need to have the people walking by wanting to try it.
So what can both new and established eateries do to stand out and differentiate themselves? Because we're currently in a very high stakes, hyper competitive industry.
So really, I mean, besides just your standard marketing and making sure your name gets out there, being on social media, if you can do it and you have the space, then having other elements of gastrogaming, having the ability to have other activities where it's not necessarily that you're coming in for the food and beverage. Let's go play darts and eat. Let's go play mini golf and eat. Food and beverage is not necessarily going to be the primary factor for people to go into restaurants, but it could be the secondary factor. And those restaurants are going to, when they have multiple diverse revenue streams, will be more successful in the long run.
Yeah, my friends and I love going for these trivia nights at different bars. So are there any niche experiences that have stood out to you?
Those are really good because that brings a lot of people in because you go in, order a drink. In Singapore, there's axe throwing, there's darts, there's mini golf, there's a lot of different pool halls. So there's a lot of these different elements that they're coming in for and get hungry or get thirsty. And these are the ones that you see survive.
So we've spoken a lot about restaurants opening, restaurants closing, bars doing things to diversify themselves. So what do you think? Is the F&B scene in Singapore oversaturated?
At this point, in my opinion, it is an oversaturated market. So the problem is that there's just not enough revenue to go around. So either we need to convince everybody to go spend more money in restaurants, which is a very hard sell at this point in the economy, or we have to do something to rein in the quantity of restaurants that are opening each month. So whether the financial institutions that are loaning them money needs to then really look at that business plan to say, is this concept in this location a viable restaurant over the next 3 to 5 years? And it's not a case of trying to say you can or cannot open it. It's a case of saying we want the right ones to open and the ones that we think are going to survive long term. That's the problem with the argument of saying we will only cap it at 200 new restaurants per month, is because that overreach seems a little strong.
So are you optimistic about the future of the F&B scene in Singapore?
So from two different angles, yes and no. So if you're saying, will the restaurant groups and the people that have run successful restaurants, will they survive? Absolutely. They know what they're doing, they have a background in the industry, and they will be successful for the long run. If you're asking for the average person that wants to get into the industry, will they survive? In the current climate, I would say no. There's not enough of that background knowledge of how the industry works to be viable for the long run. So there needs to be something to happen for those smaller players, those smaller partners to come in and also be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Llewellyn, for your time. We really appreciate hearing your insights.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.